on the road from Barnsley. More about Barnsley in a moment. First, your questions, and I know you're watching this on Twitter, on YouTube and Facebook. I promised you I'd interact. I'm doing my best. On Twitter, Paul Stevens says, Nigel, when are you going to Michelle's seat in Hull, mate? We need her as an MP. That's Michelle Dewberry. Remember her from The Apprentice. She's now regular on Sky News debates. I'll be in Hull on Thursday. Elaine on Facebook says, hello from Doncaster. See you Wednesday. You will see me in Doncaster tomorrow. Yeah, I'm going to be there. Ronnie on Facebook says, why do more people work for Boots the chemist than the Royal Navy? Are we going to get American second-hand ships instead of building them in this country? Ronnie, I was on Question Time a few years ago with Anna Soubry. Yeah, Anna Soubry, who was then a junior defence minister. And I asked her why were Royal Navy auxiliary vessels currently being built in South Korea and not in this country. She denied it was happening. 3 times she denied it. After the programme, it turned out I was right, she was wrong. We, since 2010, since David Cameron became Prime Minister, have downgraded the Royal Navy in just the most astonishing way. It's something, one of many, that needs to be reversed. Jamie on Facebook says, it would be great to see Yvette Cooper receive her P45. Now, Yvette Cooper, another Yorkshire MP, not too far from here. Remember, her husband, Ed Balls, lost his seat a couple of years back. Many of these Labour seats are vulnerable. Alan says on Twitter, oh no, I've missed the first 6 episodes, 1 to 6 of On the Road. When is the box set out? Well, I tell you what, you don't need a box set, Alan. Just go to my YouTube channel and they are all there. So Barnsley voted 70% to leave. Represented by Labour MPs, as it's been. There's been no Tory in Barnsley since 1885. So effectively, they've never won here and they never will win here. Big Labour majorities, that is for sure. But they're represented by Labour MPs who are Remainers, represented by Labour MPs who are saying to them, you've got to vote again in the second referendum with this very false choice of Remain versus, well, they call it Leave, but effectively it's a form of Remain. In the local elections in Barnsley, 7 independents got in at the last election. I've met with them this morning. They're a pretty organised bunch, but it shows if independents are beating, in some cases, Labour cabinet members in Barnsley, it shows that the winds of change are here. People will tell you it's impossible for the Brexit Party to beat the Labour Party in Barnsley. I will tell you, having been out today, I think it is possible. Not easy, but possible. But we have to get the Conservative vote here in seats like this, saying, you know what, tactically, I will lend my vote to the Brexit Party because they're the only ones that can actually beat Labour. Did an event at the Highstone Working Men's Club this morning that was well attended, then went for a walkabout downtown. Now, some of that was good, but some of that was bad. Met lots of people on the streets, and believe you me, Barnsley people are not exactly backwards in coming forwards. We could even call it, well, Brexit Barnsley, or at times bloody-minded Barnsley. And 1 or 2 people told me I wasn't welcome. Well, okay, that's life. I'm used to that. But lots of people saying, I was a miner, I've trusted Labour, they've turned their backs on me, and I will now turn my back on them. But what was distressing to see, and I've been told before I went downtown, that there was now a spice epidemic in Barnsley. And I was really shocked to see, people just sort of lolling around, clearly drugged out of their minds at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I just could not believe how serious this was. Quite how we reversed all of that, I don't know, but it was distressing to see it. Elsewhere, Jeremy Corbyn. Today was his Race and Faith manifesto launch. I think the Chief Rabbi Mervez has stuffed that overnight completely, with a big piece in the Times saying that Jews are afraid of a Corbyn government. Quite extraordinary for a big religion to to directly talk about a political party. I know we had some of this with my friend Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, in the referendum, but that was an issue-based election. I haven't forgiven him, but it was an issue-based election, but for the chief rabbi to come out completely against the Labour Party in this way, to say that Jews fear living in this country, they will fear it if there's a Corbyn government, is quite extraordinary. So done deliberately, of course, to time with this Corbyn launch and a snazzy video that the Labour Party made. Corbyn himself turned up 45 minutes late for that launch. I'm told from those that saw it and were there that it was a complete and utter shambles. Are the skids under Labour? Well, I've been suggesting to you for some time, I think they are. I do wonder whether the pledge that says to the waspy women, we'll pay you all the money, I do wonder whether that might get them some votes, although we learned from that Theresa May would be due £22,000 of back pay. Maybe that will put people off. Oh, and it'll cost $58 billion, and it wasn't even in their manifesto. No, I stick to the point. Labour are bombing. It's been a very, very bad day for them. Now, I'm in Yorkshire, big leave country. We are taking on Labour. We are taking on the Remainers. And I just get a feeling. I know for certain we're going to come a big second in a lot of these seats. What I don't know is whether we can get it over the line. What I don't know is whether there'll be a complete collapse of Labour support, partly because they come to us and partly because they just stay at home. Now, we have heard overnight that there are, they say 3 million new registrations to vote. The truth is it's 2 million. 1 million were counted already. I think, given that most are under 35, much of this will have happened throughout the universities. Although, by the time the election comes on the 12th of December, most will have left the universities. I'm all right, it's 37% up on the last election. People are registering to vote, but I think they're being encouraged to do so. The fact they've been registered doesn't mean they actually will. I still stick with my thesis that it will be a low turnout election, and unless something dramatic happens in the next couple of weeks, that's the way that it is going to be. Now, joining me on the road today is Jake Pugh. Jake and I knew each other way back in the mid-1980s when we worked a few yards from each other in an office working for an American company. Jake is now an MEP for the Brexit Party for Yorkshire and the Humber, but Jake also significantly was very much the author, project manager, call it what you will, of the contract that we launched last Friday. Jake, welcome to On the Road.
Thank you. Surely it wasn't the early 80s, was it the late 80s?
Mid-80s.
Mid-80s.
It's a long time ago. long time ago.
It feels like it.
Either way, here we are.
Here
we are, members of the European Parliament. You couldn't
Correct.
even invent it.
Yeah.
Jake, the contract. I was interested this morning in the meeting in Barnsley that the one thing that came out was the BBC policy.
Absolutely. It was the first. In fact,
because you chaired the meeting.
I chaired it, and I threw it at you. But actually, of the questions we had about 20 questions in total. 3 or 4 actually were on the BBC, actually around the lack of coverage, around the funding model, and the one I threw at you was is it time just to get rid of it? And that was what part of you said, as we discussed in the contract, part of that wholesale political reform around oath of neutrality from civil servants, the funding model for the BBC, reform of the House of Lords, and that was really tangible. I thought it was the second time we've done a working men's club. We did Featherstone back in May, and sort of irrespective of what happens on the 12th of December, as you said at the contract launch on Friday, we're moving into the next stage, aren't we? Yeah. Brexit's just the enabler, and there's just such an appetite for change.
Yes, I was sort of get Brexit done, Boris's campaign slogan, which is tempting because people have got Brexhaustion, but actually it shows in a way that what they want to do is let's get rid of this Brexit thing,
and it's
which they never wanted anyway, and then we can all go back to doing politics the way we used to.
And this is the funny thing: every time in the last 2.5 years where you felt like it's going to revert to type, a sort of a normal, Tory majority and everything reverts back to time. And every time that's looked like it's about to happen, when the deal was struck in Brussels, didn't it? It felt like, well, here we go, we're going back to normal. Something's come along to change that narrative. And maybe that's going to happen after the election in December.
Well, I'm convinced that the appetite for political change is greater than it's ever been.
Yeah.
I think the referendum we had 4 or 5 years ago on this was the wrong question, the wrong kind of electoral system, the wrong time. I think now the idea of change, certainly whenever I mention abolishing the House of Lords, they go bonkers. Bonkers.
And also,
You'd have thought I'd said they could all be lottery winners.
And also, the idea of offering peerages to an organisation that wants to get rid of the thing. How ridiculous is that?
I know, but it sums up, I think, what many now see as the corrupt nature of our politics.
Yeah.
No, I think that's right. I think the idea that, the civil service should be neutral, the BBC, in an age of streaming where we choose what we want to watch.
But there's so many other parts, aren't there? Like political PR. I mean, that's something, you've been on the inside of politics for so long. I'm coming into it as an outsider. And that's really shocked me, the role of sort of political PR, being an insider. And there truly is such a gap, such a distance between what happens in Westminster and Brussels and what happens, in the real world, up in the north, in Barnsley.
Barnsley, I was making the point earlier that, a Conservative last won a seat here in 1885, so forget it, And yet, they feel the Labour Party's taken them for granted. They never thought any kind of threat would come along to them. European elections here, we got 46% of the vote in 6 weeks. It shows you an appetite that's there. We can convert that in the next 2 weeks and 2 days. We could produce all sorts of remarkable surprises. Jay, your particular field of expertise outside of politics is, of course, the whole financial services.
Which is where we first met, or as you said, all those years ago. Yeah.
And that may seem a strange subject to have in a car park in Barnsley, but it's not really. I've been talking over the line. Last night I was in Plymouth talking about fishing. But the financial services, people talk about it as if it's all in Canary Wharf or all in the City of London. But actually, here we are in Yorkshire. If we went to Leeds...
Absolutely.
Or Bradford. What would we find in terms of financial services?
Well, I think you have to look at it, the distinction between wholesale markets, which are predominantly in London. That's where the wholesale markets operate. But you have very large retail financial services operating across the UK. So as you said, Leeds, Manchester, Edinburgh is a huge retail financial service. And actually linking that with one of the ideas we threw out again on Friday around free ports. People think of free ports as a physical manifestation of a tax-advantaged or an incentivized area in which to operate, but you could do that for post-trade, for operations, and actually really compete with other countries within the EU, particularly Ireland. And as that's something that you've made a big point of, is that's what the EU is really scared of. The other point I'd make about financial services, and I just do not understand why, it doesn't appear as if the UK has really used that, the potential leverage we have in financial services, because we are clearly by far the dominant financial services player in the European Union.
Just sort of drill down onto this.
Yeah.
So is the argument they need our capital markets to raise money overnight or whatever it may be?
Absolutely, in every sense, across the whole market, in terms of equities, in terms of bonds, in terms of foreign exchange. The most recent BIS triennial every 3 years, massive BIS report on FX. London's market share has gone up again. Global market share, #1 position. This idea that you have to be operating inside the European Union in order to be the #1 in the euro is just...
So why do I always hear the city hates Brexit and thinks we should remain?
Because, like most things in the European Union, it's all about keeping the regulatory barrier high, which of course suits the big players, but in fact, what we want is a more level playing field where people can compete. And the simple reality is there are basically 3 global capital centres: New York, Japan, and Europe. And for the UK, positioning ourselves more with New York and the emerging Asian markets is the future, not Europe. Europe needs us, but we will always continue to do business right across the globe.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with that, Jake, but it was worth explaining. And we've not talked at all yet about financial services, but it is Britain's biggest employer. It is Britain's biggest sector of income. And one of the reasons it doesn't get discussed in elections isn't because everyone thinks bankers are evil. It's because actually it's been regulated from Brussels now for so many years, it doesn't even get debated on the floor of the House of Commons. Our biggest industry will not be discussed in this general election because kind of everyone accepts in the Labour and Conservative parties that we can be regulated from Brussels and they're happy with it. I find it almost unbelievable. Jake, thank you for joining me. Well, my Yorkshire Odyssey continues. Tomorrow it's Doncaster. I was invited today, but I will tomorrow have a look at some of the flooded areas, and I can't pretend to have all the answers for anybody. I know we're talking about bigger flood defences. I do wonder whether that's dealing with perhaps the symptom and not the cause. There are some issues around dredging, other things. And again, Doncaster, a place that did itself elect an English Democrat mayor some years ago. So again, when I said to you at the start of this talk, we're beginning to see at European elections, at local elections, a breakdown in these areas that have been Labour since the First World War, and I think it's not impossible. Some of that can happen in this general election. It needs voters to understand that we are challenging the Labour Party in these seats, and it's the Conservatives, if we're not careful, that could split our vote and stop us winning. I've got more convincing to do. See you tomorrow on the road in Doncaster.